Please attention. I'd like to call this session of the Stratford Inland Wetlands Commission to order. The public hearing on Wednesday, September 16, 2015. I would ask the public, so we don't have too much banter out there, to please respect the commission. If you want to have a little talk or conversation, do it outside the room. All right, we're trying to run a meeting, and it's very important that we have order during the course of the meeting. So I will call for application 2015-4, the construction of a 5 single-family home with associated sewer and drainage infrastructure. The site address is 450 James Farms Road, Stratford, Connecticut. The assessor's reference map 550, block 4, Lot 9, the applicant is Cummings Enterprises. Is the applicant present? Yes. Just please state your name and address for the record.
Yes, sir. Welcome, Commissioners and Mr. Chairman. Thank you. My name is Attorney Stephen Bellis, and I represent the applicant, Cummings Enterprises. If I can approach, I have the...
certificates of mailing?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, if you could just give those to the Commissioner, Mr. Fay. Okay. Pass them down.
Let me start by saying that you may recall we had filed an application prior, and this is a totally new application, and it looks nothing like the prior one at all. This particular application is not an affordable housing application. This is for straightforward 5 townhouses under your town of Stratford's current zoning allowing condominiums. So this is not an affordable housing project. It's not an affordable housing application. I just want to make that clear up front.
Could you just move that a little bit so maybe some of the people could see that? The problem we have is
this drawing?
Illustrating the plan.
So
the audience?
Yeah, just maybe give it an angle. So if they want to walk around and look, that's. So the commissioners can bend it a little more this way if you could. But if somebody wants to get up and look around, could you guys see it? Okay. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So you can see here a layout. This is a general layout, and I'm just going to give you an overview. The lot that we're referring to is back here, known as lot number 2. And that particular lot on it was subdivided from lot number 1. That map is recorded on your land records, that subdivision map. What I would like to point out tonight is on the far right-hand corner, and I know it's hard for all of you to see, there's some hash marks, and it says proposed conservation easement, which is a 50-foot conservation easement on the far right of the property, which is closest to the wetlands. And what I have done, and I've given it to a draft to the administrator, and I can submit for the record, I've drafted a conservation easement, which would be a document that would be recorded on the land records, and not reading the whole thing. It's a perpetual conservation easement that doesn't allow people to go on there to clear the vegetation. It prohibits any kind of filling or construction or buildings in that 50-foot area. So that would be, maybe perhaps you would be familiar with, it would be a buffer that would be in perpetuity to protect your wetlands. I've drafted it. If council or the administrator has any changes or anything with the language of it, it's pretty standard. It's based on the state statutes. So let me offer that.
Okay, great. We'll put that as an exhibit.
It's already on as item G.
It's on there? Okay.
I have it as item G. I already have it listed.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I'd like to mention is that the property is going to be serviced by sewers, and so there would be an application before the WPCA. We'd have to get those approvals to get from the Water Pollution Control Authority for the sewers, but basically it's a sewers that would go up the driveway away from the wetlands towards James Farms Road, okay? There would be nothing that would be going towards your wetlands. And again, I have, the engineers will go over a little bit more in detail about that. We have submitted, and I take it it's part of the application, we submitted an application, and then the administrator had some questions, and then I would like to put in record our responses to those. We've responded in writing to each of her questions. They were very valid questions, so we gave our responses. So I just want that to be part of the record as well.
Fine.
Thank you. I have two witnesses that I'd like to call tonight to go over the application in more detail. The first expert is Phil Tizio, and he's with the engineering firm of Rose and Tizio, and he's going to go over some of the particulars about the engineering and some of the site. So if I can call him now at this time.
Yeah, fine.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. I'm Phil Tizio from the firm of Rose, Tizio and Company with offices in Fairfield. I'm going to walk you through the engineering and the site layout plans. As Steve mentioned, this is a simple layout plan which shows 5 freestanding 2-bedroom townhouses situated on Lot 2, served by a driveway that comes through a right-of-way to a turnaround right in front of each of the units. So in the design of this development, there's a small wetland area in the rear of the property.
Could you just speak a little louder, please?
Yeah, I'm going to move There's a small area of wetlands in the rear of the property. It's approximately 1,775 square feet, borders a brook, which is situated off the property. So we are proposing to place these 5 freestanding units and everything else at least 100 feet or more from the wetland area. So we've got a 100-foot line drawn. None of the improvements cross the 100-foot line. In order to develop the site, fill will need to be brought in. The land slopes from a high at this property line to a low in the back where the wetlands are. We need to bring in a varying amount of fill. It's not a consistent amount because of the topography, but in order to do that, we need to create a retaining wall along the edge of the roadway that will extend up and just past this unit. The height of the wall varies from about basically a foot to a maximum in a very short area here of 10 feet, but then it drops down to 6 to 4 to 2 to 1 feet. So there is a fill. It is a filled lot. We're not removing any soil. We're bringing soil in. With regard to the stormwater drainage, we are providing a double set of catch basins in the driveway here. The driveway slopes. There's a peak here. The driveway slopes down. Those 2 basins will pick up that runoff. There's a third catch basin at the back of the cul-de-sac, and all the water is collected in those 3 basins. All the storm water on the pavement is collected in those 3 basins. The water then enters a downstream Defender water quality unit, which is an oil grit separator, and that water is then discharged into an underground concrete gallery infiltration unit. The roof drains from all the buildings also flow directly into that infiltration unit. So all the water that hits the pavement is essentially, has to run through this downstream defender, which takes the oil and the grit out before it enters the infiltration chambers. The roof leaders go directly into it because roof water is clean water. From the infiltration system, there's a small overflow pipe which goes into a control structure which lets a very small amount of water flow through it and discharge on the other side of the wall, and then that water would then make its way down into the wetlands. There'd be about at least probably 110 feet of distance before it gets there. The infiltration system is designed to handle the 5, the 10, the 25, the 50, and the 100-year storm. And in each case, it reduces the flow, the outflow, to a level that's less than the existing condition right now. So we're decreasing the runoff with this infiltration unit and infiltrating the water into the ground. There was a question about, do we know where the water table is under the system? The system is, the bottom of it is almost at existing grade, so that there's no water table at that level. It's the surface of the ground, and it almost sits, within a foot or two of the surface of the ground. So water will infiltrate. It's not going direct. It's not in the water table. Let's see. Okay, with regard to the sanitary system that Steve mentioned, since the lot is downhill from the road, the sanitary sewers will flow into a holding tank. Each house has its own sanitary line, typical to any house, really, and runs into a holding tank, and then there'd be a pump next to the tank that will pump the sewage through a force main up to James Farm Road to a proposed manhole, and then this runs down the street, down James Farm Road to a manhole that exists for Harvest Ridge Road. That sewer extension is something that we have to get approval from the WPCA. We have to submit plans. They have to sign off on it. Any plans we would submit would have to fit their future plans for extending sewers in this area. They'd have to be designed to accommodate any future sewers they have. Getting back to the tank, in the case of a power failure, the tank is designed to hold 24 hours of sewage flow from the combined 5 units. After that point, we have a propane actuated generator that would kick in to start the pump and pump out the tank in the event that a power failure lasted more than 24 hours. So there's no health issue with regard to the sewage system. It's accounted for with the generator in the case of a power failure. The wall is going to be constructed from the upland side. It's one of any variation of Versalock or a Bronco block wall that can be literally, they're stacked on top of one another on just a gravel subbase and tied together, and they're really literally built from this upland side. We're not going to have to enter into the, excuse me, into the 100-foot area to construct that wall. We've submitted a soil erosion control plan, which pretty much encapsulates the property with siltation fence. We show a anti-tracking pad going out to James Farm Road. We've got the standard, just the standard soil control measures on here, including protection of the catch basins during construction. We've got a very simple landscaping plan by providing screening to the neighbors to the north and the neighbor to the west. And then we just have our standard engineering details, which are just standard on the next pages. We show a detail of the wall, I think on SP5, just a cross-section of a typical concrete block wall that gets keyed together and reinforced to withstand it has to be engineered, but it would be engineered to withstand the load of the soil behind it. What's not called out on the plans, but I'd like to put in the record, is that there would be a 4-foot chain link fence on the top of the wall for protection.
What type of fence?
By code.
A what fence?
A 4-foot chain link fence.
Chain link fence, okay. All right, look, I have a few questions before you go any further. Let's go back to the galley system. You're saying that the galley system that you're going to install is going to handle all the runoff from the impervious area, leaders and gutters, and during a 5, 10, 15, and 25-year storm, it's going to retain that flow and then disperse it below grade? Is that where it's going to be dispersed? How is it going to be dispersed out of the galleys?
Good question. The tank itself is not just a tank; it's a perforated tank. So some of the water will flow into the surrounding soil and infiltrate the groundwater, which is a standard.
But you're talking about a good volume of water that's going to be underground.
We are, and it's a large
right.
It's a large tank.
So I mean, if we have a significant hurricane that have lasted for 2-3 days, okay, it's going to take that much longer for that water to have someplace to go. I understand that you're building up the grade, but how is that going to disperse so that you're not going to have overflow?
Right. There is an overflow pipe that goes into what's called a control structure.
Yeah.
And basically, there's it's a concrete box that has a baffle in it. At the bottom of the baffle is a small opening that lets a small amount of water go through, less than the natural condition, but there's always water during a storm flowing through that. Mm-hmm. If it reaches in all those storms, though, in all the 5 to 10, 25, 50, and 100, it'll retain that volume of water, but it's always letting some water go off. So it's always draining itself.
And the water is going to eventually lead down grade and into the wetland area.
Right, but less than it normally would. Whereas we're decreasing the flow.
And this is going to go on the other side of this wall? It's going to disperse on the other side of the wall?
Correct. There's an outlet on the other side of the wall. It gets dispersed. So
are you going to have any kind of, like a riprap or
Yes.
something to
Yeah,
break the
there's an
flow?
energy dissipator.
And what's your proposal for the grading and the planting on the other side of the wall down to the wetland line?
Well, we just have a new turf reinforcing mat in the area of the outfall. We're not proposing to touch what's in the 100-foot area.
All right. Before you go any further, any questions on this particular issue from the commissioners? Mr. McCann.
Do you calculate a perk rate for the soils underneath these galleys?
We do not have perk tests.
What would you expect that the perk would be in this type of a situation?
Well,
I'm just trying to figure out. An inch and 10 is a fairly fast perk rate. That's not a lot of water movement laterally, horizontally, I should say, or in your case, it's not going to go laterally.
right, but the material that'll be brought in surrounding the whole unit is going to have to be gravel. So it's going to
feel that
percolate
it's capable.
laterally through that gravel.
The other, and it looks like your system is, I'm guessing, somewhere around 10 feet away from your wall at its closest point. Is there going to be any hydraulic effect on the wall, or are we going to have breakouts, or
Oh, you mean
particularly
water
in the
bleeding through the wall?
lower right-hand corner of your cul-de-sac?
We could, if that was a concern, I suppose we could put a barrier against the wall. If that's a concern, we could put some sort of vapor barrier. I don't see that as a big issue. Most of the storms are not going to fill the tank, except for the major ones.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to get to you next. Yes, Mr. Schlager.
I heard you say on a power outage, can you go over did you say something about a propane tank?
It's just a propane actuated electric generator. Instead of electricity,
That's going
it
to be
runs.
fed by a propane tank.
Right.
Now, is that going to be a gauge on that, or it's going to be on a weighted scale as far as how much is left of the propane? If, like Mr. Chairman mentioned, a vast storm, will you know how long that tank is going to be lasting?
We would size the tank to accommodate, a long period of time like we've had in a couple of the hurricanes where, it was out for a week or so. We could do that. The pump doesn't run constantly. It has a holding tank. It fills up to a level. It doesn't run every time somebody flushes a toilet. It fills up, and then it runs, and then it shuts off and lets the thing run. So it's not running continuous. But we could accommodate a lengthy time with a large propane tank, underground propane tank.
And that's going to be periodically maintained? How is that going to?
Well, the condominium association would have to. There'd have to be a maintenance program to keep that full.
Staff, do you want to have any comments? Tina?
Well, in particular, on the topic of the galleries and the proximity to the retaining wall itself, I noticed that in the plans it said the area of backfill directly adjacent to the wall itself would be impervious versus pervious material. So I just had concerns. How will that affect flow from the cul-de-sac over the top of the wall? Would we be seeing sheet flow in essence if that material is not pervious?
The tank, is sized to contain the 100-year storm.
So you have no concerns of that impervious backfill having any?
No.
Okay,
No.
Good?
I'm good on that topic.
All right, I have a question concerning the septic system on this thing. I understand you're going to have a backup, and I understand pumps are going to pump the waste to James Farms Road, but I'm not happy with the fact that there's no contingency plan. A house has a secondary leaching field, has an area for the flow to go to. Let's say the pumps fail. Let's say the generator doesn't start. I'd like to see some type of a secondary area where this stuff can be held, because that's the last thing we want to go into the wetland.
There is...
Water's one thing, okay? And I'm going to stress this. But sewage is absolutely forbidden.
Right.
So if you want to come up with a better plan on that, or some type of a secondary system, fine. But I work in manufacturing. I know how pumps operate, okay?
Right.
They break down all the time. 5, 10 years down the road, nobody's going to maintain this stuff, right? The last thing we want is raw sewage going into, even in the neighborhood.
Right.
So I'd like to see
We don't want to see...
a much better contingency plan on that septic system.
There is the option of having a septic tank truck pump it out. You know, you could empty it if there was some catastrophic failure where the
Well, even if you had septic tanks in the ground, that if this overflowed during a breakdown or an unforeseen event, that it would capture what doesn't get pumped out to James Farms Road, okay? All I'm saying is I don't think that system is designed to where I'm happy with it. And I don't think the people in the neighborhood are happy about it either. So think about that, because this is not over tonight, all right?
This is not...
No, we're going to continue this public
Okay.
hearing. Are there any other questions from the commissioners? Yes, sir.
Could we just go back to the stormwater retention system? Is there a maintenance required for this? And is there a contingency for any pollutants which may enter it?
We have a note on the drawing that the galleries are to be inspected every 12 months and vacuumed if the depth of the sediment is greater than 1 foot. And then the catch basins are to be inspected and vacuumed every 6 months if the sediment is over 12 inches.
The circle that's on your drawing with a half dark, half light, does that indicate a manhole, or what is that?
That is a manhole to access the overflow pipe.
Okay. In the case of a spill, what would happen? Let's say let's use oil spill, for example, that may enter one of the catch basins.
All the water that hits all the pavement goes through the oil grit separator before it goes into the holding tanks.
You feel that the oil separator would be sufficient to?
It needs to be maintained like any other downstream defender or oil separator, but yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
How are these homes going to be, what type of fuel are you going to use? Gas, natural gas, fuel oil? How are they going to be heated? And how are you going to supply them? You have above-ground oil storage, you can have gas lines. Are utilities going to be underground?
Yeah, the utilities are going to be underground. I'm not sure if there's gas available, but if there's gas, it would be run by gas, but we'll use oil as a secondary.
All right, well, we're going to want to know that for sure.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
Just,
Mr. Waite, and then I'll
Just
get...
one question going back to the sewer line extension off of James Farm Road. If that doesn't get approved for this plan, how's that going to affect your plan now, if you can't tie in?
It doesn't, the plan doesn't go forward. We have to have the sewer
Okay.
approved. Right. There's no alternative
So
to that.
the plan actually gets, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Bellis, did you want to say something?
No, I agree with that.
Okay, all right.
I thought I had said we have to go to the WPCA to get.
Yeah, I know it was, contingent to that. Tina, you wanted to?
That was my next comment, actually. The contingency plan in place if the WPCA approval did not go through. So that was just answered.
All right, are we pretty much,
I do have one additional question on the maintenance of the chambers themselves. How are they exactly accessed? So when the chambers are going to fill up with some amount of sediment over time, how will that be maintained, being that it's covered with concrete asphalt?
There are 3 access points, 3 manhole tops, covers over the system.
So someone
that
can
it could be
physically
vacuumed,
enter?
jet
Okay.
sprayed and vacuumed out.
all right, any other questions from the commissioners? No? You guys good? All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Bellis, did you have someone else you wanted to have?
One other, just 2 points, and I can leave Phil here. Are these your systems designed?
Could you just get closer to the mic, please?
Has everything you designed, is that designed to the standard of the best management practices?
Yes.
Okay. And I just wanted to address, I think it was the gentleman over here, on the propane tank, they have now the generators, they run every week on a particular day, like a Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and that kicks on for 15 or 20 minutes throughout the whole year, so that you know that the oil in the tank is working and that the system is working, so that, and it also keeps it from freezing up. So, that's what they've been doing, and that's standard and common practice to make sure that that generator functions in the event that there is a storm. The other point I'd like to make is that we are going to have a condominium association. There's going to be rules and bylaws. There's going to be a fund where people chip in for common charges, and so there will be monies appropriated in order to do the cleanouts, as Phil has explained, and the inspections. So this is not something that's going to go unfunded and without any responsibility of the homeowners. It'll actually be in their condominium association documents. So there is a system in place to address the issues that you gentlemen have brought up tonight.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Phil. I also just want to make sure that the record is clear that there was a drainage report that was submitted along with the application, and that be made part of the record. I believe that was, I think on mine it's dated June 11th, 2015, and that has all the very specific information about the flows that you were talking about. So if you could just, I don't want to.
It'll be there.
It'll be part of the record, okay. I forgot to give you the actual green card. So. I do have another witness tonight.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
The witness I have is a soil scientist, and he's going to discuss with you the actual wetlands and the impact that this project will have on the wetlands. His name is Michael Klein, and I have, and I can hand you, stay there, I'll give you his report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Michael Klein. I'm a biologist and a soil scientist. My office is in West Hartford. I've been practicing in Connecticut now for 38 years. As you've heard, this is a 2.25 acre site roughly on the east side of James Farm Road. It slopes down gently toward the east to the wetland area. We flagged the wetland area in the field by looking at the characteristics of the upper 20 inches of the soil profile with a spade and auger. This is the standard technique. that's anticipated in the statute and in your regulations. We mark the wetland boundary with 6 flags, WL 1 through 6. It's shown in this darker crosshatched area at the extreme southeastern corner of the site. It's a very small area extending onto the site. It's 4/100ths of an acre. Footage acre computes out to 4/100ths of an acre. The soils are the Ridgeberry, Leicester, and Whitman, extremely stony, fine sandy loam soil complex. This is a very, very common soil on glacial till throughout Connecticut. There are 2 poorly drained soil series and 1 very poorly drained series that are all mapped together because they're present on the landscape in a very complex pattern, and their use interpretations are very similar, and there's no reason to have to separate them out. The non-wetland soils are also very typical glacial till soils. Sutton in the area immediately adjacent to the wetland, and then the Paxton, Montauk, typical well-drained soil with a hard pan that we see throughout the glacial till in Connecticut. The wetland drains from north to south. There is a small perennial stream, as Phil mentioned. It's located just off the site to the east. It's what I would call a upper perennial or nearly perennial stream. It probably doesn't flow for short periods of time during the summer. Based on the summer we've had now, I would anticipate that that would be the case. It's fairly narrow, 4 to 6 feet in width. It's fairly gentle gradient. The flow's low velocity, and based on the characteristics we saw in the stream, it probably is typically about 3 to 6 inches deep when it's flowing. As soon as it passes off the site onto the properties that are fronted on Judith Terrace, it is channelized. It's confined to a channel, and then it passes into a culvert under Judith Terrace. The non-wetland areas of the site are predominantly a typical hardwood forest situation that we see in Connecticut. There are no known records of any state-listed species on the site. The Connecticut Natural Diversity Database that documents known occurrences, the nearest record is approximately 1,500 feet to the northwest on the western side of James Farm Road. Looking in more particular focus on the wetland, it's been known for the last 30 or 40 years that not all wetlands are the same. They don't all perform the same functions or provide the same values to society, and that's an important element of any impact assessment and design process, to identify the significant functions and values and design to maintain them. There are a variety of methods that have been developed to formalize a wetland assessment. The one that has become the de facto standard in Connecticut is known as the highway method. It was developed by the Corps of Engineers, the New England District, and it's really, as I said, has become the de facto standard throughout New England. It identifies 13 separate wetland functions and values. They're enumerated in my report. The degree to which any one particular wetland provides these functions or values is determined by a variety of biological, human, social, and hydrological factors, including landscape position, where the wetland is on the land. Is it at the top of a slope, the bottom of a slope, on the slope, in a river valley? It's based on the type of soils that it lies on, whether it's saturated for long periods of time or flooded for long periods of time or just very briefly saturated, what the disturbance history is in the landscape around it, and also, importantly, the size. This particular wetland in Table 2 in our report on page 5, we summarized our best professional judgment as to the functions and values that this wetland system provides. None of them are provided at what is defined as a principal level. A principal function is a function that is significant enough, important enough to have a value that affects the overall characteristics of the surrounding land and the wetland system. The major factors that limit the ability of this wetland to have, so in other words, we just identified either functions that were not present or such as recreational or educational scientific value, uniqueness, or endangered species habitat. The rest of the functions are present at what we would consider to be a secondary level. The major limiting factors that cause this are the lack of any deep depressional topography, which would retain standing water for long periods of time, a relatively low density and diversity of wetland vegetation, and then there's additionally human disturbance factors that also result in these wetland only having a secondary functions. The land use practices and in the site vicinity and the hydrologic modifications in terms of the relative density of development and the culverting of the stream and so forth. There's a fairly lengthy discussion on a report on each specific function. If any of the commissioners have questions on that, I can go over it. As you've heard, the plan involves 5 freestanding residences that are going to be organized on a condominium basis, and there is a access drive to enter the site. The most universally recognized and pretty undeniable technique, the most significant technique for avoiding wetland impacts is avoiding work in the wetlands. The site plan does that. There's no work contemplated in the wetland. In fact, there's no work contemplated, as you heard, within 100 feet of the wetland boundary or about 125 feet of the watercourse. So when wetland impacts are completely avoided, no direct wetland impacts, then we focus on minimizing indirect impacts. Indirect impacts are those that result from activities outside of the wetland, which can affect the hydrology, biology, water quality, or a hydro period of the wetland. And on sloping sites like this, it's not a very steeply sloping site, but it is important to have proper erosion and sediment controls. The plan that's provided is appropriate for the level of activity that's proposed and for the characteristics of the site. The entire area of disturbance is relatively small, only 2 acres. It can be handled with very conventional controls that are passive in nature. Provided they're installed correctly, they should be very effective at preventing any indirect impacts during the construction period. The other most important element in terms of preventing indirect impacts is controlling the water quantity and quality from the site and runoff, both in terms of potential to cause flooding and potential to cause degradation of resources downstream. As you've heard, the underground detention system and outlet control structure provides for reductions in peak flows for all the storms analyzed, and the reductions range from 1 to 37%, so it's a fairly substantial reduction in peak flows. The system also has the required pretreatment. These underground detention systems and infiltration systems require pretreatment to work properly, and there are oil grit separators proposed to provide the appropriate level of pretreatment. The system is oversized. It's the requirement from DEEP is to provide treatment for the water quality volume. There's a calculation for that. The engineers do that, and they're indicated to me that the capacity of the system is over twice the size that's required for the water quality volume. So the system should perform properly. It has the proper pretreatment. We did review the plans and make a couple of recommendations. They're contained in my report. There was a small area that didn't pass through the downstream defender, the grit separator, and we recommended a second one be included, and the engineers have indicated to me that that's perfectly acceptable. You heard Mr. Tizo mention a turf reinforcing mat at the outlet of the overflow from the system. We recommended that, and that's on the plan now. And we also recommended that a maintenance protocol be called out for the system, as the commissioners have pointed out. And it's also a truism that without proper maintenance, none of these work in the long term. So the maintenance protocol is pointed out, and you do have a legal and administrative structure with the condominium association to implement that maintenance protocol. So in my opinion, while several functions and values are provided at a secondary level, none of them were considered significant enough to be considered a principal function due to the lack of deeply depressional topography, lack of prolonged standing water, low density and diversity of wetland vegetation, and low structural diversity of the vegetation. In addition, wildlife habitat has been adversely affected by past land use practices that have resulted in wetland encroachment and fragmentation. That's not to say that there's no wildlife in this area. We would expect the fairly typical suburban wildlife species to be present here, but there's no the characteristics of this wetland are such that they wouldn't provide a significant level of habitat for wetland-dependent wildlife. The plan, as I mentioned, avoids any direct wetland impacts. The indirect impacts are mitigated by the offset, the 100-foot plus offset to the wetlands, by the conservation easement that will maintain the natural vegetation in that offset area, as well as by the use of best management practices to control stormwater quantity and quality. It's my professional opinion that if these measures are installed and maintained as required, there will be no adverse impacts to the wetlands or watercourses at or adjacent to the site. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, are there any questions from the commissioners in regards to soil scientists? Yes, Mr. McCann.
Have you been retained to do any future inspections and checking for the adequacy of what you've asked in your report? Through the phases of construction, are you going to come back?
If the owners ask me to, I will, and I suspect if it's a condition of your approval, they will ask me. It's not at all uncommon to require some monitoring during construction. I will let the commission know that actually this site is small enough that it probably won't require a deep general permit. So I was going to say that function is part of the stormwater pollution prevention plan, but this site probably isn't going to need one. So sure, that would be appropriate.
Okay. Tina, any comments at all?
Not at this time.
Anything from the commissioners? No. Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, I have a couple questions right now.
Yeah, if you want to, sure. Right now is a good time.
We'll share this, okay. Mr. Klein, the Connecticut General Statutes 22A-41 enumerates 6 factors that the Wetlands Commission can consider, and I just want to take you through them very quickly and ask your opinion on it.
Sure.
One would be, do you have an opinion on whether this proposed project would have an adverse impact on the wetlands?
It will not.
Do you have an opinion whether this project would have an adverse impact on the long-term productivity of the wetlands.
It will not.
Do you have an opinion on whether this project will have any irreversible losses of the wetlands?
There will be no loss of wetlands whatsoever.
Do you have an opinion whether this project would have any adverse impact on the health and safety?
I think that's probably more associated with the engineering, but the fact that there's no septic effluent discharge here and that the flood flows are reduced would lead me to believe that that's not the case, that there wouldn't be an impact.
And finally, do you have an opinion whether there would be any adverse impacts outside the wetlands?
No, there will not.
Okay, I have one other question. Do you have an opinion within a reasonable degree of scientific probability whether any of this proposed activity will have a significant impact on the wetlands?
It will not.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, at this point, I don't have any other witnesses to present.
That's fine.
I understand that you have the documents that we've already provided in the record, so at this point I would close my presentation.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do is, I understand there are 2 interveners that want to be part of this application. I will give them a chance to state their concerns, then I'm going to have the public speak in favor or against, and then I will give you a chance to address issues at the very end. As I said before, we're going to continue this public hearing because we will have a list of recommendations that we're going to want to propose to you, and that's going to take a little time, so we're not going to close it. But so if you want to just sit tight,
Okay.
I'll ask. I know the town wanted to be one of the interveners. Is there a representative from the town here?
There is, Your Honor.
Yes. If you want to come up.
Yeah, I just want to state for the record that I have not seen any of the intervener petition applications.
Okay.
Prior to
Well,
right
we'll
now.
make you privy of
Yeah.
what they propose. Okay.
No, I understand.
Yep.
And then I would like to say that you had a question, and we would like the opportunity to answer your question about a secondary area, remember?
Yeah. Well, we're going to go over that.
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't want you to think
Right.
we were ignoring that. We're not.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is James Cresswell. I'm an attorney at Kevin Kelly & Associates. Our office is at 2505 Main Street here in Stratford. At present, and Attorney Bellis pointed this out, we have not filed an intervention petition with the Commission. We do anticipate doing so, but we had to see what the applicant put forward tonight at the public hearing before determining specifically what questions to ask, for example, our engineer and our soil scientists. So,
All the information that was proposed tonight is, available to you or one of your representatives. So.
absolutely. And Mr. Chairman, we did receive the plans, obviously, but we wanted to see specifically what the testimony was so that we could discern what questions, if any, we would have for our own soil scientists and engineer. What I would ask is that at the continuation of the public hearing, and you indicated this would be continued, that the town at that point be permitted to present testimony from its experts.
Yes. Yes.
And I'll end it there, at least as far as the town's position is concerned. I know there is another intervener who wishes to speak tonight and members of the public as well, so I'll leave the town's remarks there.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Ezek, are you here? Did you want to come up and voice your concerns?
Good evening, members of the Commission. My name is Richard Ezek. I reside at 570 James Farm Road. My residence is just to the north. I'm a budding property owner of 450 James Farm Road. I asked the chairman to accept this intervention petition.
Absolutely. You could just give it to... Yeah. Yeah, the desk is fine. We'll get them. Yep, thank you. Okay.
That'll be whatever's in line. I'm not sure what it is at this
Yes, sir.
point.
Go ahead.
My name is Richard Ezek. I am a civil engineer with over 40 years' experience in the design and all phases of civil engineering. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Connecticut. I've been registered since 1978. I've had the opportunity to review these plans in detail, and I compiled 6 concerns that I have, technical concerns that, in my professional opinion, each one of those concerns alone is cause to deny this application. I have a 7th concern after listening to the applicant's testimony tonight, which I do not have any written comments on, but I do have comments and substantiate all my concerns in this record that I will be submitting tonight.
Right, great.
I have 11 copies, if that's sufficient.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Concern number 1, sustainability. A sustainable design is one that protects the environment over the course of its service life. For the purpose of my argument, I'm going to suggest that the service life of this project is 50 years. It's 5 townhouses. Certainly you could argue that the service life could be 75 years. I'm sure people live here in houses that are older than 75 years, but just for my purpose, it's 50 years. 18,000 days, approximately 18,000 days. This project, as it was designed, relies on numerous systems for sustainable performance. These systems are the catch basins, the underground storage tank, the oil water separator, the outlet control structure, the sewage lift station, the pumps, the outsourced power supply, the emergency propane generator, the propane, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Each one of these systems requires human intervention to be sustainable. The risk is high that one or more of these systems can fail through mechanical fault, human error, vandalism, lack of intervention during the service life. Failure of any one of these systems can result in the wetlands and the entire environment being compromised. For example, the sewage lift station must operate continuously 24 hours a day, 365 days for 18,000 days. Mechanical systems don't operate for 18,000 days without needing some sort of maintenance, replacement, etc. How is that done? The applicant doesn't really address it. We got 5 single-family homes having a total of 10 bedrooms, being without water, washing, cooking, bathroom facilities. If the system goes down, what is the consequences? Chances are the sewage could overflow. It's going to make its way into the wetlands, and we have a disaster on our hands. There's a history of power outages in here, and that lasts up to 7 days, and we simply don't have a response from the applicant as to what his secondary plan is should any one of these systems that I just mentioned fail. And remember, these systems have to perform for 18,000 days. Has to perform on day 1, day 1,000, and day 18,000. Concern number 2. Rainfall data. The applicant's engineering report states that the drainage design is performed in accordance with TR 55. It is a recognized method for calculating storm runoff volume in small watersheds. I'd like to share with you a little background on TR 55. TR 55 was first issued in 1975. The 24-hour rainfall duration data used in TR 55 is based on a document called Rainfall Frequency Atlas of the United States, and for short, TP40. TP40 was published in 1961. TP40 relies on data that was collected in the 1950s, some 60 years ago. Subsequent to that time, there's been 50 years of new data that's been collected by the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration. That data is currently being put into new documents, which is going to replace TP40. The information in this new document is now available. Everything is digital today, so it's not available in hard copy. There is a publication, well, there's a website called precip.net. It's extreme precipitation in New York and New England. and it's a digital format where you can go on that website, you can use Google Maps to zero in on your location, you can type in a latitude and longitude, or you can type in a town, and it'll give you what the current data is for rainfall, extreme rainfall precipitation rates. The Connecticut Department of Transportation, which has its own drainage design unit, they provide the latest design criteria for drainage design performed for the state of Connecticut. They issued a general memo in December, general memo number 1404, dated December 17, 2014. And I just read you an excerpt from that memo. It says, and this is in my package, designers developing hydrologic studies for the department that make use of Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS unit hydrograph methodology, TR55, are directed to assess the applicability of the 24-hour precipitation rates now available from the Northeast Regional Climate Center website, Extreme Precipitation in New York or New England, precip.net. The designers should compare the precip.net values with drainage manual values and ultimately use the higher values. I did my own little investigation of precip.net, and I entered in the site and got my precip.net precipitation values for 24 hours, and I compared them to what the applicant publishes in his engineering report. Just starting out with the 25-year storm, TP40 is 5.7 inches in 24 hours, and precip.net is 6.26 inches in 24 hours, a 10% increase. Jumping down to the 100-year storm, and by the way, a 100-year storm, you may or may not know, it's any storm that has a 1% chance of occurring at any time. 1% chance the storm can occur tomorrow, a 100-year storm can occur the next day, can occur on day 100, can occur anytime. Anyways, for a 100-year frequency storm, TP40, which is the rainfall intensity that the applicant's engineer used, is 7.20 inches in 24 hours. If you go to precip.net, which is the most current data, you get 8.78 inches in 24 hours, a 22% increase. In my professional opinion, I strongly recommend that the drainage design be based on precip.net data, which is the latest data available. So, in conclusion, by the applicant using the rainfall data published in TP40, he wants you, the committee, to believe that extreme rainfall events do not change over time. And more importantly, he wants you to believe that rainfall events are not affected by climate change. In fact, to be safe, one cannot accept as fact that rainfall data collected more than 60 years ago is valid today, tomorrow, or 50 years from now. Concern number 3, underground storage volume. Oh, just excuse me for 1 second as I bring a prop up.
Go ahead.
If the applicant could remove his prop, please. Thank you. This doesn't apply just yet, but it will be applying in a few minutes. Okay. As I started to say, concern number 3, underground storage volume. The applicant states on SP2 that new concrete storage chambers, this is a quote, new concrete storage chambers, 320 linear feet or 4x4, volume equals 6,494 cubic feet, bottom elevation 216.0. These galleys that he's proposing are fairly standard galleys. They're leaching galleys. They're used all the time in septic systems and leaching fields. You could go on United Concrete website, and you can download a specification on a 4x4 galley, which I did, and it's included in your documents. A 4x4 galley has, just give me a minute, please. A 4x4 galley, and this is published by United Concrete Products on their specifications for 4x4 galleys, It has an inside capacity, a liquid volume of 330 gallons. Simple conversion to cubic feet is 0.134 gallons per cubic feet. Each galley, a 4x4x4 galley, contains 44.2 cubic feet. Do the arithmetic. You got 320 feet that he says he has of 4x4 galleys. That comes out to 3,540 cubic feet. And then his detail shows he's got 1 foot of trap rock on either side of the array with 66% voids. Just adding that into the storage capacity, I come up with a total of 3,960 cubic feet. He says that he has 6,494 cubic feet. False and misleading information. This math is basically a math that a high school math student could perform. One other thing I'll point out down on SP2 down in the lower corner in his title box, designed by SFS, checked by MJS, tells me that 2 sets of eyes have looked at this drawing. 2 sets of eyes can't pick this mistake up. I think it's a willful intent by this applicant to provide false and misleading information to this commission. Concern number 4, gallery inspection and maintenance plan. Again, sheet number SP2, note number 1, I quote, galleries are to be inspected every 12 months and vacuumed if sediment depth is greater than 12 inches. In other words, what he's telling me is that 25% of that storage volume may not be available because there's 12 inches of sediment in those storage storage galleys. And we have a storm, and all of a sudden we don't have 25%. However, and assuming his storage volumes are correct, which they're not, assuming they are correct, he says, well, I got 100% of my storage volume available for my 100-year storm. Can't have it both ways. Can't have it both ways. Proper design would allow your volume would be computed based on 125% of the need if you're going to state that 25% sediment is going to be allowed to accumulate in those storage galleys. More false and misleading information. Concern number 5, dust control. Again, SP2. On the plans, it says that there's a net 4,275 cubic yards of borrow material that needs to be trucked into the site. 4,275 cubic feet of borrow. That's over 400 triaxles bringing in material. There's no dust control plan. The fill is being placed 125 feet from the wetlands. You're going to bring in 4,275 cubic feet of material, plus the wetlands is downwind, is east of the filling zone. The westerlies, the prevailing westerlies, will carry any dust or debris that gets airborne from this operation right into the wetlands. What's the consequences of the wetlands when that happens? The applicant's silent on it. Concern number 6. Cul-de-sac drainage. This is where I want to bring my prop. I want to use my prop. I don't know if you can see it or not. Would it be better if somebody holds it up?
Yeah,
Okay. Very quickly, what's shaded in yellow is the impervious area that the applicant says is being drained into this catch basin. There's one little catch basin sitting down here in the low point of the cul-de-sac. What's in green is also the area, in my opinion, which all drains down to this one little catch basin. Consider this a bathtub. You've got a curb behind that catch basin 6 inches high. All the rainfall that collects in this area here has no place to go but to that drain. Once the pond's 6 inches on that catch basin, it breaches the curb, the whole drainage plan is shot. None of the water enters into the storage chambers. At the very least, a calculation should be performed to see what the inlet capacity of that catch basin is, to see if it can take that drainage area. In my professional opinion, it cannot. I'm not doing the engineering for the applicant. I'm not going to tell him whether it can or it cannot. It needs to be demonstrated by him that it can. Furthermore, catch basin clogging, a very real issue. What I did living on James Farm Road. These are the 4 catch basins. I took these this weekend. These are the 4 catch basins that are on James Farm Road as they sit right now. As you can see, at least 50% clogged, 100% clogged. That catch basin sitting in the drain of a bathtub, anything, any litter, any trash, any grass clippings, any leaves, anything in that area is going to be washed into that drain, has no place to go. It's going to clog that catch basin. That catch basin, if you're going to do an analysis, I believe, in my professional opinion, that that catch basin needs to be analyzed, assuming it's at least 50% clogged, at least, perhaps more. Those are my 6 concerns that I address in my report. I have one other concern that I have based on the testimony that I heard earlier. And in that testimony, the applicant's engineer said that there's a sanitation holding tank is designed to hold 24 hours of sewage flow in case of a power outage. If you look on his plans, what he shows as a holding tank, the inlet pipe and the outlet pipe are at the same elevation. Simply stated, that tank is going to fill and operate in a full capacity all the time. There is no storage. Again, false and misleading information. That concludes what I have to say about this application. I think, as I stated earlier, 7 concerns. Every one of those concerns, in my opinion, is cause to deny this application based on technical grounds.
Thank you, sir. Do you have any questions from the commissioners, Mr. Ezek? At this time, staff? No? Mr. Ezek, thank you very much. You're very informative. You brought out a lot of good points. You really did.
Let me just say one thing.
All right, at this time, what I'm going to do is I will give the public an opportunity to speak in favor or in opposition to the application. I just ask, as I've done before, to limit your questions to wetland issues only, please. That's really the only jurisdiction we have here. There's going to be no dialogue between the public and the commissioners, but we always listen to your concerns. We discuss your concerns administratively, and any points that we feel have to be brought up to the applicant will happen. So at this time, I will ask if there's anyone here that wants to speak in favor of the application. We'll eliminate that right off the bat, all right? Is there anyone here that wants to speak in opposition to the application? Please come forward, state your name and address, and speak clearly so the secretary can get your concerns.
My name is Meryl Pruitt, and I live at 575 Peters Lane in Stratford. I have a report and copies of a report from Dr. Steve Dancer, who is our wetland scientist for the Concerned Citizens Group.
Right.
Okay.
You want to submit those as an exhibit?
I would like to do
Sure.
that.
Sure, you can bring them right up.
Okay. Shall I just sit them on the table?
Oh, you could just hand them up here. This is easy. Just
Now, these are his environmental comments. He's in court right now and could not appear tonight with us. Do you need me to read or
no.
get any highlights
We
or
could
anything?
accept your material as.
He has some excellent summaries and some answers to.
We will review it.
Pardon?
We will review it.
Wonderful. Okay. That was one thing. I would also like to submit a historical document. Give me one moment. This is I have a number of things, obviously. We've been busy. The African American history document, the James Farm Road. I want to submit those as well. And these were prepared by myself and Mr. James Lynch, who is an ethnohistorian, and I have included his curriculum vitae with this. And let me make sure I have the right thing. This is not easy. Okay, this is the historical documentation, and it includes a article from the New York Times listing and documenting 28 grave sites that were secrets from the 1700s here in Connecticut, and that is on a small piece that goes with each one of the documents that we have. I can read this as well, but I think...
If you wish, yes, absolutely. Sure.
Okay. The question is the question of ethno-historical significance of Stratford's first black community established by free slaves and possible artifactual items and burial sites at 450 James Farm Road. And thank you for allowing me this opportunity, by the way. African American genealogical research is a challenging discipline at best. Records pertaining to blacks are much more difficult to locate due to sociologically liminal status of blacks, which resulted in scant and inaccurate record keeping prior and into the 1900s. Blacks, coloreds, or mulattoes, typically denoted by B, C, and M, were frequently used in early local record books as well as in the U.S. federal census. Vital records that were recorded for white Americans used W or white, and they are quite different from those of African American records, which did not always include all of the information about an African American individual. The research is also hampered by the availability of record books that have disappeared due to fires resulting in destruction of record books and the fact that many books have been lost or disposed of over hundreds of years. Of those historical books that are still in existence in the town of Stratford archives, the handwritten documentations and vital records books contain scant pertinent information about African Americans. From all the vital records books in Stratford, including one from the 1600s, the handwritten records listed colored men and women and their vocations, such as fishermen or maid, but most of these records listed only their last names without their first names, parents' date of birth, marriages, or death records. Overall, the descriptions of this racial group that appeared in these records were oftentimes inconsistent. The following research was conducted by James P. Lynch, an ethnohistorian, and Merrill Pruitt, utilizing the holdings of the Stratford Historical Society and those Stratford vital records located at the town clerk's office, with additional data derived from Mr. Lynch's prior research, 1993 to 1998, in regards to the Golden Hill, Pagosset, Connecticut land claims and their attempt to gain federal recognition as an Indian tribe, which was noted in a book published by former Bridgeport City historian Charles Brilvich entitled A History of Connecticut's Golden Hill Pagosset Tribe. Mr. Brilvich's central thesis that the black population of this area were descendants of the so-called Golden Hill Indians was a claim rejected by the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
Ma'am, could I just ask you to summarize it?
I beg you to listen to just this last couple
Ronnie,
of paragraphs, and then I'm
what
going
does this have to do with wetlands? I don't understand
Well,
at all.
it's a land claim involved with the...
We don't need a history lesson. I don't understand.
I understand. If you could just summarize it,
Okay.
we'll look
Okay.
into the legality
okay,
of it.
I understand. And I wasn't going to read the whole thing about
Okay.
all the documentation and the history. What it comes down to is it was a common practice in those days to use the burial sites on the lands where people lived. We have researched numerous cemeteries and have not been able to locate a lot of the names of the people that are on record who lived on James Farm Road and were granted the tracts of land. It is in the record books from 1646 on for hundreds of years. And even the rock wall on the property at 480 James Farm Road is we have we have tested it, and it is at least 300 years old. So this goes back to those times. So it's very possible that there are artifacts on that property, as well as grave sites. And if you take the time to read this and look at the numbers of people that we were looking for and couldn't find any documentation of them in the cemeteries, and the article that showed the 28 graves giving up secrets of the 1700s in Griswold, Connecticut, you'll understand why we're asking for an archaeological search, and including, sorry, my hand's not working too well. In addition, this history, ground penetrating radar. Thank you, Mr. Ezek. What I would do with Mr. Ezek without Mr. Ezek. So that's what we're looking for, in addition to archaeological study on this property, and that's all in this articles and reports here.
That's great. Thank you.
No, it is.
So I will just continue with my report from the and comments from the Concerned Citizens Committee and group, which a lot of these folks, good folks, are here tonight.
Go. Okay. Okay. Yes, go. I'm sorry.
It's all right. On behalf of the Concerned Citizens Group, here to refer to as the CCG, we recognize that because you serve on this committee, you are doing a great service for our town and our community. The CCG appreciates your dedication and unwavering commitment to hearing the arguments regarding this application. We respect the members of this committee and hope you will consider us as your conservation and environmental partners, making an effort to save open space and a wetland for the town of Stratford. I would not presume to give you a lesson on what the town has promised the residents or what the IWWC is responsible for with regard to the Town of Stratford Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Regulations document, nor the Town Plan for Conservation and Development, both adopted by the town and located on the town website. But for the record, I will point out a few facts from those documents. The Town Plan for Conservation states, the goal for environmental considerations is to preserve, protect, enhance, and restore the town's environment, wetlands, waterways, and water resources, as well as its habitat and topography. This plan states its objective is to protect and enhance wetlands and other environmentally sensitive areas, to protect rare and threatened plant and animal species and habitat, to protect and enhance water quality and the community's groundwater and waterways, to protect and enhance areas with significant topography from runoff and degradation. I think you're going to see some different things from Dr. Danzer's report that will refute some of the things that were mentioned here tonight on this area, as well as I have included with my report, which I will also hand in as part of the records. We do have actual sighting and photos of the endangered sharp-shinned hawk that habitat is in this habitat, and of course we've also mentioned the turtle before, and the last one that's in the eastern box turtle in Stratford is in that wetland area. And the DEEP is very interested in coming and looking at this small wetland area. It is small, but it is a habitat, nevertheless, for very protected and endangered species, and including George and Gracie that you heard about last time. The two ospreys that have made it for life and nest right there next to this property. I'm going to skip ahead to save you from my reading all of this to you, but it was important because I noticed that the easement was mentioned tonight, and I also had the easement, a certified copy actually submitted to the IWWC that is still on record and is valuable at this point in time, is still part of the record here. And it's important that we point out that that certified copy, it was submitted into the record on February 18th, 2015, and is still, pardon me, is still a viable document on record with this committee today. The easement clearly states that it was given by the IWWC for the purpose of, and I quote, to detain stormwater runoff and to preserve the natural state thereto, and to conserve and protect water, soil, animal, bird, and plant populations. The easement further gives IWWC directives such as, quote, that no structures of any kind without limitations, sewage disposal systems, wells, watering systems, fences, advertising signs will be placed or erected, that the topography of the landscape shall be maintained in its present condition, and that no topographic changes shall be made. Topographic changes include, without exclusion, filling, excavating, removal of topsoil, sand, gravel, rocks, or minerals, building roads, or altering natural or existing watercourses or drainage, that no trees or other vegetation shall be cut, removed, or destroyed on or within the property covered by this conservation easement. The easement concludes the purpose of this conservation easement is to maintain the easement area in perpetuity in its natural, undisturbed, and undeveloped condition unless otherwise approved by the Commission for Wildlife, Natural Resource Enhancement Purposes, and other purposes. The CCG can be defined as over 300 residents living in a quiet, compact community surrounded by lush, wooded areas, including the peaceful Roosevelt Forest that offers shade from the summer sun and is a crucial refuge for beautiful birds as well as other wildlife and plants. To our way of thinking, it would be a total disservice to the IWWC and the people in our town if this easement and the goals of the IWWC and Town Conservation Plan were not honored and respected. In the best interest of the town of Stratford, the IWWC, and the people that live here, we respectfully ask that the IWWC conform to this point of view and stand firm and align with the town's policies to protect the wetland and watercourses on this property and reject this application. In conclusion, it is the only view that will give everyone peace of mind and satisfy the arguments and reports provided to the committee by the residents, the CCG, and the professional experts. And thank you for listening to that. And I will make sure that I leave copies of my presentation for all of you as part of the record. I'll be delivering a petition that's been signed by a number of people, and including their comments. I'll be delivering those to Tina after I make enough copies for everyone. Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to speak in opposition to this application? This gentleman that's walking up.
Good evening. My name is Robert Smith. I live at 135 Pepper Ridge Circle in Stratford, Connecticut. In the Inland Wetland and Watercourse Commission and Ms. Christine Seneth Beto, Conservation of Stratford, which is directed to the request, oppose and deny application 2015-4 for building this housing complex, 5 cluster homes at 450 James Farms Road in Stratford, Connecticut, to prevent water pollution to wells, the wetland, watercourses, and a perennial stream flowing into the Housatonic River. I'd like to hand these out, if I may.
Sure. Just, you could give it to, yeah.
There's 2 copies, one to support the first. In going over a report written about Long Island Sound, the EPA states that polluted storm water is responsible for 40% of U.S. water bodies. and does not meet EPA standards. They also state that buildings such as the one proposed should never be built on land with a pitch toward a protected area. It also states that 1 quart of motor oil will pollute 1 acre of land and can cause 8 acres of oil slick. Okay? I had some concerns, and I wrote these down as everything was mentioned. We know that we've had electrical problems, and so, and you're a manufacturing person. This isn't a Six Sigma operation. And all we do is need one failure, and that's it. The condo association, how is that set up technically? It sounds as if they're going to build this and they're going to walk away. I live on Pepper Ridge. Now, in the present state, Harvest Ridge, if you get a severe rainstorm, the water that washes down that street into Pepper Ridge is very, very substantial. All we need to do is to add any kind of waste to that, and that's going to go right into Roosevelt Forest, which is going to go right into the Sound, which we all know at this particular point what is going on with hopefully the cleaning up of the Sound itself. Cement, I don't know if anybody's had a cement basement that they had water go through the walls. I certainly have. So a cement wall, as far as offering protection or whatever, what protection is that? Acid rain. A catalytic converter, and this is fact, for the first 5 seconds does not operate. It is something that the automotive industry is dealing with. And what happens with that is waste from your car goes into the air, and then after 5 seconds, your catalytic converter starts to warm up, and then the car itself, there's basically no waste at all, or it's very clean according to the standards itself. Now, acid rain becomes airborne, and as it becomes airborne, it lands on our soil. That soil is going to be penetrated, and eventually it's going to get to the wetlands, or it's going to go underneath this wall, which it will. And we also know about cement because all you have to do is take a look at any of the bridges that we have here and take a look at the cement that's fallen off and whatever, and you know that this method is not something that's going to keep wastewater and waste out of our system. Recently, and this has something to do with what happened, we 2 weeks ago had a 2-inch rainstorm, 2 inches an hour in the Midwest of the country, where the water ran up into the valley, came back down, and killed God knows how many people. 2 inches of rain in an hour is not something that you would look at and say, this is extreme. This is something that happens here. And we're not prepared for that. In the technical end of the condo association, you have people who move into houses. Who's technical? Who calls somebody? Who's responsible? What kind of time happens in between when something happens, and who's trained to go in there and say, gee, the pumps aren't working, we got to get somebody. All right? By the time somebody's called, there'll be enough waste that will go through that we're going to turn around and forget about anything else that's there. The cement also is on the top of the ground. Is there anything underneath it to keep it from going underneath? I don't think so. We also, and I know from being part of a landscaping and snow removal business that we had 21 snowstorms last year, not counting rain. So if you take all of these things together and you look at what the EPA said, and as I said, being a manufacturing person, and you look at the components that you have in there, Six Sigma is 99.997, you know, and almost nobody makes something that's Six Sigma. So what do you think this is going to be, 4% that we're going to have in there? Maybe it's 5, okay? So what does that lend itself to be? It lends itself to the fact that something is going to happen. Just once. That's all we need. And we are finished. So I would say to you that the DEP talks about point of operation. And it talks about the fact that the only way that you can turn around and prevent any kind of pollution is not to build that. If you look at which they're talking about, the angle in which the water and whatever comes down, and then you look at Harvest Ridge and you look at Pepper Ridge, the way that's designed or whatever, that waste itself is going to turn around and it's going to go, because the water already does, it's going to go fast as heck into Roosevelt Forest and into the stream. And you're not going to be able to stop it. If you can't stop the rain, how are you going to stop the waste? You already have an example there.
Just 1 second, please. Got to change the tape. All set.
So anyway, sorry to get so emotional about it, but when I look at it, and I think about the fact that who's going to benefit from this? Who's going to benefit? And who's going to lose? And if somebody walks away from it, which we're already talking about now, because the condo association is going to be the people that are responsible, who technically, basically know nothing. All right? And so that's where we're going. We have a design here and whatever, but nothing to turn around and monitor what's going on. So I just think that's something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. This is Curcio, Roger, at 875 James Farm Road. My concern was the 5 units being approved on the 2¼ acres right on James Farm Road. If this goes through, the owners of the property are the same that bought the farm at 795 James Farm Road. They just sold about 22 acres of it to the town of Stratford, I believe, for about $320,000 as forest land attached to Roosevelt. It's all attached to Roosevelt Forest. Now, there's still 4 acres on James Farm Road. If they get the approval for the 5 units across the street at that, 500 at, the address you said before of where you want to put the 5 condominiums, what's to say that they can't take the other 4 acres on James Farm Road across the street at 795 and build condominiums in there, and then go to the other property they own behind the firehouse on Ornoak Lane and build that 70 unit. One will lead into the other. Am I right? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak in opposition? Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Ordner, live at 10 Judith Terrace. I don't have anything prepared, and I didn't know. I knew I didn't need to, because every time that this enterprise brings something, it's always incomplete. The big word is if. That's if everything works right, if everybody maintains it, if the pollution, if the sewage line is approved. They're putting the cart before the horse. They don't even know if they could get a sewage line up James Farm Road. And I know that the 4 properties that this sewage line is going to have to pass are probably going to be taxed for it. And I know for a fact, that 3 of those 4 people do not want the sewer line. So we're being, and I'm trying to stick to basic facts. And I realize this really isn't your thing to deal with, but 3 of those 4 people are going to be taxed for this development that wants to go through, and they don't even know if they can get that through. They're literally putting the cart before the horse. The other thing, when they wanted to put in 37 units, they had a 2-inch plastic waste line that was force-fed. Doesn't tell us if that's what they're going to have this time. And now they're telling us that it's going to come down the driveway out up to James Farm Road. Well, that driveway is very long. That driveway was built in a way because there is most likely rock and ledge under there, which is going to create blasting. All along that driveway entrance abuts other people's properties, and all of those properties have wells. Mine especially, and I still use it. How is that going to affect? Is there anything to guarantee that, number one, the blasting is not going to affect our well water, and number two, that their sewage line, that we don't even know if it's plastic, metal, whatever else, if they've changed it. We know that water mains that are 8-inch break and freezing. When this is going to come through such an area, it's going to be prone to frost heaves. Now, another aspect about this is their sewer line follows the driveway. That driveway is above elevation to all the properties on Judith Terrace. So if that sewer line goes, all of that stuff flows into the backyards, not onto their property. It flows into the backyards of the people on Judith Terrace, and it flows directly into their wells. There is nothing to stop that. They're saying, now they're proposing to put in a propane, I don't know what that is. Okay. Now they're proposing to put in a propane tank. They're saying that it's going to be underground. I'd like to know what's going to run such a large pump. How big of a tank do they have to have? And why do we, the neighbors of this property, have to incur that risk of a propane tank? Where are they going to put it on their whole plan? They have no place on this current plan that shows they're going to have an underground propane tank to keep this thing running. The last time I had my power out, it was for 14 days. So even if their propane works for, let's say, a week, they still have, there's no guarantee. The power company could hardly get into our neighborhood to get the power on. How is the propane delivery system going to get there? And who's to say that they can even get it there if it hasn't been damaged in a 100-year storm? Another thing, they're saying that with all the roof area and the street area, that they are actually going to put less runoff into the wetlands. I really, really, really find that hard to believe. What they're doing is using that water to flush their system, so they're adding more water to the system to get better results on the standards, on the effluent that actually comes off of the property. If they didn't have those houses draining right into the street, that street water would be very concentrated with oils. The other thing no one's really looking at is they're saying they have these oil retention basins. Do they retain fertilizers? Do they stop the ammonia and all of that is used for fertilizer, which we know and has been proven by the University of Connecticut and so many other studies that this is a direct impact on the sound. The more lawns, the more greenery that everybody has, the more stuff they spray on it goes directly into the sound. Just last week, there was editorial by the Connecticut Post, by the editors, addressing this specific issue, urban sprawl. Additionally, this commission, in its various forms for over 50 years, has insisted on house density of approximately an acre in this area. The start, when Judith Terrace was first put in 1961,
That's zoning.
I understand that, but the Inlands Commission also went along with,
We do
they should be,
factor it in, so.
pardon me?
We do factor in density.
Yes, and that's what's been traditionally for over 50 years. Judith Terrace, Harvest Ridge, they made sure that there was a sufficient amount of land put aside for the town and that everybody, just to keep the natural balance. They didn't want to overpopulate. I cannot understand how 5 houses on what is maybe 2 acres. I've heard everything from 2 1/4 to about 2. Now, if you're saying 2 1/4, you're figuring in a driveway. You're not figuring in a backyard. This driveway, they don't even know about the utilities that are available. They couldn't answer the question about where the gas line ends. I'm not going to tell them. And I don't think I should. These people are paid thousands of dollars to know what they're supposedly talking about. And I'm not going to say they're misrepresenting themselves, but this gentleman over here has proven that their calculations and the manufacturer's calculations are 2 different things for those galleys. There's 2 different things. Who's right, the man who makes them or the man who's presenting you with his opinion? It's a big if. I didn't come here with a prepared statement. I came here knowing that none of this is good, and there's always something that should be questioned. And you can clearly see there's many questions. And I want to know what their contingency plan is going to be if that sewage line fails, because it's only going to affect the groundwater. It's going to flow east, and it's going to flow south. And it's going to affect all of the wells, not just the wetlands, but the wells. And the wells are actually part of the wetlands. That's a fact. I appreciate the time.
Before you go, we just need your name and address again.
My name is William Ordner, and I live at 10 Judith Terrace.
Okay. 10. Thank you.
And I feel that, what I brought up is justified. Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? Yep, come on up. Name, address, please, clearly, so secretary can...
Hi, how you doing? My name is James Boyd. I live at 480. I'm the front property of that. First lot.
What was the property again?
I live at 480 James Farm Road.
480 James, okay.
No, 480.
480?
480.
He's my next door neighbor to my driveway's right side as you come up. Anyways, when we originally sold this property about 8 years ago, we had a hard time selling it because of the inland wetlands and all this people, somebody else too, I forget, can't remember the name. But it was sold for originally 1 house, not 5, not 37, 1 house back there. That was it. And we were having trouble getting that through then. So what changed so much now that we can put in 5 houses or 37 houses? And where's it going to stop? Is it going to grow? Is he going to, put something else in, acquire some more property, put more houses? It was sold for 1 property, 1 house, and that was it. And that's what I got to say. Oh, the other thing is, how am I going to get in on my driveway if they're going to be putting sewer pipes down and everything? My property sits about 15 feet above the road, about 6 feet above Mr. Ordner's property. How am I going to get in on my property? What am I going to do? Park in the road and walk? My mother's 85 years old. She can't, she ain't going to be climbing over stone walls, getting up into the property. So that's pretty much what I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Since my son advanced my years a little bit, I have to get up and defend myself over here.
Please name and address, please.
Francis Boyd, 480 James Farm Road,
Right.
Stratford, Connecticut, and I really started this whole mess. I sold 2 acres to Nick Owens. He did a bait and switch. It ended up with Curcio. Now it's all over Stratford, for God's sake. We live on the high side of the road. Some of us were pretty protected, but Judith is going to drown because the water's going to flow downhill. It doesn't flow uphill. And I remember when my mother bought the property, and we're talking a lot of years back now already, she always said, buy on the high side of the road. The other side of the road's no good, and there was no houses there even at that time. And how some of those houses even got in there, I don't even know, because if somebody's drunk, they're going to come right up Oak Lane and land on their roof. They're just going to go right across James Farm Road and going to have it right on their roof. But anyway, my point is, our house is like Topsy. It grew. It was a small house when my mother first brought it, and we added on, and we added on, and we added on. Now we have a great big house on a great big piece of land. However, some of our walls, as my son will attest to, because he does a lot of the work around there, they're plaster. He even marveled that the plaster is so even and so beautifully done, as the workmen of those days did that in the original end of the house. If they blast, we're doomed. That's it.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition or in favor? All right, seeing none, Mr. Bellis, do you want to address anything now? Well, as I said, we're going to continue this. No. Yeah, no, I understand. All this stuff is on record, and we will review all the information that we got tonight. Basically, all we're going to do is just ask for a motion to continue the public hearing until our October meeting. And Mr. Fay, seconded by Mr. Waite. All those in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, none. Carries unanimously. Thank you, folks. We'll probably see you next month. Did you want to say anything?
I only ask that the next commission meeting is on the 24th of October. I will be out of town on the 24th. And on the 21st. My information is in the record. I stand by that information.
Yeah.
Is there any way that it could be moved before the 21st?
I don't think we could change the date. That's pretty much set. You could talk to Christina and before you leave, and because we're going to have our recommendations. Maybe you can touch base with her. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. That's it. No, that's a typo.
What's that?